Well, welcome everyone to the Rural Ministry webinar hosted by Hope Network and Oklahoma Christian. I'm Grady King, and this is kind of an experiment with us at collaborating with OC and Hope Network to host this Rural Ministry webinar, and we're delighted you're here. I'm the co-leader of Hope Network and work part-time as Director of Church Resources at Oklahoma Christian, and so we're thankful that you've joined us. This webinar is going to be for 1 hour today. And before we introduce the other participants, let's get our Zoom webinar orientation from Bridget Price, who works with Hope Network and so graciously helps us with this. Bridget, would you orient us a little bit?
Yes, I was going to tell you, if you have any questions that you have during the webinar, use the Q&A box on mine, it's at the bottom of the screen. On yours, it may be on one of the edges, top edge or side edge. You'll just have to hover. And if you see a Q&A box, you can put any questions in there. And then if you have just a chat, just a comment you want to make, you can put that in the chat box. We do have a record of these interactions. So after the webinar, we'll be able to get back with you if we need to. And I think Grady wants to start with everyone clicking on the chat box and putting what church you're from and where you're from. Is that correct, Grady?
Yes, that'd be great. If you could just enter in the chat box. I see Aaron Lewis and Barry Pritchard, Jay Tyree from Alva, Barry Pritchard from, oh my goodness, Barry, I just lost where you're from. And Wayne Atkinson's from Salisaw. So there's Kristen Turner. Grateful for Kristen. She's an Arkansas gal. Lyle Hinsdale in Kansas. And thanks for joining us, Paul. And so if John Mulligan, I think, is here as well. So if you would, just be patient with us as we learn this today. Bridget's done this several times. So I will say that several rural ministers have been in a conversation over the past few months about rural ministry and offering some webinars. Rural ministry has its unique characteristics. And two ministers on our team are Warren Baldwin from Ulysses, Kansas, and Jake Perkins from Canadian. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your ministry contacts, and we'll move on from there.
Ulysses is a small rural town in southwest Kansas. We have a small rural congregation. We are very southwest corner. Our larger COVID cases in the early part of this thing were in the eastern part of the state. In the latter part, we did have a lot of cases at the meatpacking plants. So that really kind of brought the situation to bear on our local churches, made it kind of imperative that we be very, very careful. We have roughly, when this thing kicked in, the quarantine, we were running about 85 to 90 attendees on Sunday morning. 5 of those families, consisting of all of them with children from 2 to 5 children apiece, gave us grave concern about being able to maintain contact with them through this period. So they were still warm and connected toward us when it was over. So those are just kind of a few things that going on here.
How long have you been there, Warren, and Ulysses as a minister there?
20 years.
20 years. Boy, you get quite a bit of history. Well, thanks for your ministry, your longevity. Jake?
Well, I'm Jake Perkins. I'm the preaching minister at the Canadian Church of Christ in Canadian, Texas. That is northeast of Amarillo, about 90 miles. Been here almost 6 years. We've got a wonderful little congregation here of about 280 to 300 on Sunday mornings, and just a loving place that we've really enjoyed for the last 6 years. And so glad to be with everybody this morning.
Well, welcome. Well, let's just jump right in to some challenges and opportunities is kind of the broad heading for this today as we think about this. So let's begin with the obvious. In light of COVID-19, it's certainly been challenging for all of us and for everyone in the culture, no matter where we live. It has made us hit the pause button in a way, and for a lot of our churches, and presented us some new opportunities as well. And we have all known that church is the people, not the building. So in light of that, that's been underscored through COVID. How are you doing? And how's your congregation doing in general?
Go ahead, Warren.
Our congregation is actually doing very well. We can speak about this from our connection, but also from financially. You know, we had some grave financial concerns, as everybody is aware, for their own congregations. One of the things we did a couple of weeks into this, one of our elders investigated thoroughly, and we came up with an online, app where people can donate. And we're probably behind the curve on that. I spoke to all three of my children, and all of them are at churches where they've had that for some time. So, out in the rural sector, you don't keep up with all that as much. Well, we caught up in a hurry, and financially, things have just been very, very well. We've been very blessed with that. In terms of connection, how are we doing? We were very concerned about the 5 families, but because we were able to engage with them beforehand and there was a sense of connectedness, that has continued through very, very well. And we've maintained good connection with them. Some of them are very unconcerned about this whole COVID thing. So we've had a number of cases of them just coming by our house, bringing them food. My wife was ill for a while during this period, so we had them bringing food to our house. And these are people that have only been coming to church for a few months. So we still have been able to maintain a lot of excitement, and that's just been a blessing for us, and we're thankful for that.
Great, thank you. Jake, how's Canadian America?
Well, it's been good, but yet I think it's been full of its times of frustration too. When you're having to look at a lot of things you've lost, programs, events, trips, mission trips that have had to be put aside. That's been difficult. I mean, there's been some times with that, but also I think it's been good to look around and realize some of the positives, some things we've gained. We've learned that through this thing that we really need each other. And man, the church, I think somebody said it best, is virtual church is okay, but it's kind of like a virtual beach vacation. It's only good for a few minutes. And we're longing to get back together. We've been real blessed during this thing, during this time away from each other, that we were already set up to do things online, had an app, had that all set up, and we had small groups already set up. So we ran most of our communication and things through our small groups, and then broadcasted our services through YouTube and Facebook Live. And so we were able to maintain, but we've had our ups and downs of just struggling, but I've been proud of our church family, really proud of them.
Good. What about your plans to get back together? I assume you've been doing online in some kind of form, you've said, but what about your plans on getting back together, either one of you? Warren, what's your movement there toward that?
We've been following the, I guess you'd call them mandates of our governor very closely. So we didn't meet the whole time we were not supposed to meet. And then when she allowed 10, we went to 10. Then she had phase 1, phase 2. She interjected a phase 1.5, in which she bumped it from 10 to 15. So we've been observing 15. This week, she's thrown it open to the county commissioners to decide for their counties, and they've pretty well thrown it open for us. But we are still going to follow what the original suggestion was and keep it at 15 through June 7th. And we will open up on the 14th. Initially, it was only supposed to be 45. So we were making plans for two services that would accommodate 2 groups of 45. Now we are pretty much free to just have it open to the whole congregation. Our auditorium is big enough that we can allow that, and also, maybe separating the children, having a program for children, just to allow more space in the auditorium. So we're moving the way we've been going, still doing our live streaming on Sunday morning, and opening up on June 14th.
Wow, so and your size of your church is like 80 to 90, roughly?
Correct.
Okay. Jake, your numbers are different, you're in a rural area. So what's your plans?
Well, we've tried to slowly, follow Governor Abbott's advice here and the directions and guidelines here in the state of Texas with numbers of people, but we haven't pushed. Every other church in town here is open. We're not. We're the last one to get back. And that's because of the size of our auditorium doesn't really allow us to space out. Up until last week, it was 25% of your capacity, which would have pushed us to doing 6 services. And we were not going to do that. We have 326 seats, and we average right at 300, and that puts a lot of strain on us. We also wanted to lean into almost a little bit of vision and teaching for our church in that, and saying, look, we're still church. The house churches we've got going that have 10 to 25 people in them, or even the families that are, empty nesters with meeting with another empty nester. That's church. And we've been pushing into that. But we are blessed this Sunday. We're actually going to open this Sunday, but not at our building. We are going to be able to get into a big old pavilion. There's a big pavilion here in town that we can rent out. It's about 3 times the size of our facilities. And so we're able to spread out there. We did send out along with that, maybe some helpful information. I'd be willing to share this if anybody needs an infographic on what we expect, some guidelines for getting back together for worship, and really pushing in that while you may not be concerned about this virus, others are. So we take love your neighbor as yourself very serious and want to be responsible to other people. And so we're pushing into that really hard.
So that's Kansas and Texas. I know we've got some from Salisaw here and McAllister, Alva, Oklahoma. Would somebody put in the chat what's Oklahoma? Is Oklahoma wide open, or are there still restrictions? Would somebody type that in, and we'll keep moving here and then answer that. So
we've also got some Tennessee on.
Tennessee too. So if you could enter that in the chat just to see what different states are doing and how open it is, we'll go from there. So
we got somebody here from Lander, Wyoming.
That's
right.
Yes, that's a beautiful state, by the way. So, we don't really learn if we don't reflect. And a lot of churches just talk about, let's get back to normal. Let's get back to normal. Let's get back to normal. And Jake, you've already said we've taken this time as an opportunity to kind of look at some things. So if we reflect over the last 2.5 months that we've been doing this, what would you say you've learned as a minister and as a congregation in reflecting on this? What have you learned about church yourself?
I think week 1, I don't know where it came from, or I don't even remember where the thought came from, if it was original to me or somebody else. But, about week 1, when we stopped having services there early in March, it occurred to me that at the end of this thing, when there is a return to normal, or whatever we want to say, or return to the new normal, that it's going to be very clear to non-churchgoers, to the unchurched, to our community, whether we were a church that's a Sunday club or that we were actually the body of Christ. Because we could just check out. We could just kind of do our Sunday thing and keep kind of going. So we really got challenged with that and trying to go, okay, are we going to continue to represent Christ through this? And that's been probably the most difficult part of it. Not that it's hard to represent Jesus. I mean, that's who we are. But let me explain that. It's been difficult to transition everything that was so building-centric, program-centric, to handing it off to people in their homes, handing off our ministries and saying, we'd like to see you do this, and being creative about, we can't get everybody together, but we still want people enjoying fellowship and harmony together through ministry, just doing it apart. And so we really tried to push into that. And that's the one thing we've learned. We've learned that we're still church, and church is much bigger than a Sunday experience. It's every day. And I think it's things that we always said, but this is something we've actually had to experience and do. And that's been such a blessing to us.
Warren, thanks, Jake. That's kind of where my head and heart is about this. But Warren, what about you? What do you say you guys have learned? Your church has learned, you've learned about yourself, anything during this time?
I think one of the things we learned is, there's a writer named Israel Galindo who talks about 6 functions of leaders. There's managing, there's leading, there's handling conflict. You've got to have somebody that is very, very deeply rooted in the Bible and can teach it well. But 2 of the real important ones, one is being a person of influence, and another is being engaged. Person of influence is where your character is out there and you're caring, you're concerned, and the people can read that and see that and they connect to you. Engagement is being involved in their lives, whether visiting their homes, phone calls, having them in your home. And one of the things we've learned is how important it is to have influence in place before a crisis hits. If we hadn't had the connection to these 5 new families, which has really been our biggest concern, because in a small church, 5 new families, that's major lifeblood, you know. And we've been concerned about our connection with them. And fortunately, because of connections made with them beforehand, and because enough of our people who are of character were able to, you know, create a sense of influence with them, that has carried through this period of time very, very well. Our engagement, of course, has had to change from personal, one-on-one in the home, sharing a meal together at a restaurant, wherever, to more online stuff with Zoom and phone calls. But there's also been some personal contact. But even though our engagement, the nature of our engagement has had to change, it has still been effective because the influence was established beforehand. So that, I think, is one of the things we really learned, the importance of those, the high touch of human beings before you even go into a crisis, being connected, knowing the names of the children, being with them, sending them a card for their birthday, whatever it is that you do. And we have people in our church do all those different things, but showing that level of interest, letting them grow to know you, love you, and respect you, establishing that influence, and then that helps this part of the journey when it becomes more difficult.
Sure. And I would say in rural context, people have relationships and they know each other in the community through schools, ball games, and everything you do. Like Jake, how large is Canadian as a community? It's what, 3,500?
Yeah, a little less than that now. It's about 3,200. So.
And
yeah.
What's Ulysses, Warren?
6,000.
6,000. So in communities that size, if you've been in the community a long time, you kind of know people and relationships, and it makes you more agile. It makes integrity more important in some ways. Integrity is always important, of course. So that's good.
Yes.
So talk to me about, both of you have elders. I've talked to several elders and ministers lately. And one elder told me in Northeast Texas, he said, we divided up the church. We've been making calls every week to people. And as we make and we realize we should have been doing this all along. This is what shepherding is about. And some of them saying it's exhausting. We're tired. But hello, welcome. So how are your elders functioning? How are your elders doing? You resonate with what I'm saying here?
Jake, you want to go first?
Sure, I will. We were in the middle of, actually, when this hit, we were in the middle of adding new shepherds. And I love the attitude of our at the time existing shepherds. Said, we're not going to pause on that. We're going to continue to move forward. And we went ahead and added new shepherds. And then when this hit, they divided everything up, started doing the weekly calls. They've been wonderful. I think best thing we've heard from our church family is, as I've talked to people and I'll make calls, they'll go, oh yeah, I talked to my shepherd this week, and they've called every week, or they've texted every week, and they've just connected. So it's been tough on them. It's been exhausting, but man, they've connected in ways that they've never connected. They've had conversations that they've probably been wanting to have for 6, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 3 months, whatever, of trying to connect with people. So that's been a blessing, huge blessing for our elders to step out there and do that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Warren?
Repeat the question again. I know what I was going to say, but I want to make sure I direct it specifically to the question.
What about your elders? How are your elders doing, and how are they functioning during this time?
In preparation, one or two of my elders may be on here. I'm looking. I cannot read the screen with my glasses from here, so I've got to lean forward. So if I'm doing that, that's why. I'm trying to see if they're on here. I wrote to them and I asked them, what are some things you've learned from this? How do you think you benefited? And one elder said, I have done more shepherding during quarantine than I did before.
Wow.
And part of it is what Jake did is we divided up our church. We have 5 elders. We divided them all up by 5. So each one of them got a list. I did not get on that list because I was making my own calls. And I was primarily focusing on new people and other people that had visited. And they're focusing more on our already members, although I'm calling them too. But most of our members have gotten to call every week, and they would rotate through the list. So each elder is calling over the course of this time. They've called the entire congregation. But then we also do things like for Mother's Day, we always hand out a flower in the assembly. So what we did this time was the elders took their flower and personally with their wives, personally delivered to the various families. That was toward the end when we were starting to loosen up a little bit, not completely. So some families were comfortable allowing us in to visit. Some we just put it on the porch. One older man said, leave it on the porch and my wife will come out and get it. Stand back 6 feet. And I said, yes, sir. His wife came out and talked 15 minutes on the porch. Just thrilled to get the flower and thrilled to have a visit. One of my elders was out of town, so on the week of those deliveries, I got his list. So I got to do his business for him. That was just one of the things that really struck this elder in particular, and really all of them, is how much shepherding has been done during this time. My mother-in-law lives with us. She's in a separate list than my wife and I are for these pastoral calls. And we came home one night and she was just so excited that one of her elders called her and asked how she was doing and talked with her for about 15 minutes. So, well, that makes some really personal, deep personal touches that were valuable.
Yeah, that's this one elder I was talking to recently said, I've known some of these people 30, 35 years. And I'd say there's a good portion of them. I learned things about them during this time I never knew. And I've been going to church with them for 30 years. And part of it's their openness, their willingness, and it's the situations created. So there's been some really good come out of this. I know that churches were concerned if people aren't attending, you've done online contributions. Some people say, well, contributions are really going to go down. Has that been your experience?
No. In fact, I think we've even shown financial increase, maybe because we aren't doing some of the things that we had planned. LTC is a major, major disappointment that we couldn't go to leadership training for Christ. Ron's on here. He knows how much that has meant to our church. That has kept our church together through some hard times. And it was major disappointments that we couldn't go to that. But we've actually shown little increase.
Oh, that's great. That's great. What's your name? Jake.
Thanks, Grady. We've done okay. We were down, the first couple of weeks, and then as people kind of picked it up, and I think as they just kind of got more in rhythm with what we were trying to do and communicate, and once they heard from our elders and that kind of got rolling, I think it's all picked back up, and we've been pretty close to budget on a weekly basis. So we've done well, but we're an oil and gas town, and week 2 of this thing, 50 men in town lost their jobs, and
wow.
I mean, our church family makes up 10% of the town goes here, and so we wow. That affects a lot of the things that we do, and we're continuing. I think there's a lot of people that we've seen. We sent out a survey to check with people on financial needs and stuff, and there's been a lot of people really worried whether they've lost their job or not. And so the 2 big markets that have been hurt, cattle, beef industry, and oil and gas industry, is what this whole town, that's what everybody does. And so it's been interesting, but people have still been faithful in a lot of ways.
That's great. Well, there's been several good things put on chat about what churches are doing in Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Kansas, various things. And it's all over the map about what people are doing depending on the size of the church. So thank you for sharing that very much so. Let's move to, how's your church? It's one thing to take care of your church. It's another thing to think in terms of how does your church continue to bless others in the community and reach out and minister in ways. And I think that would be incredibly opportunistic in a positive way for rural context. So Warren, what's your church? How would you describe that, or either one of you?
One of the big concerns we had at the outset was how many people in our town would lose their jobs, like Jake just mentioned, because we also are based on the cattle industry. We don't have the packing plants here where coronavirus is broken out 1 hour north of us, 1 hour south of us, 1 hour east of us. Garden City, Liberal, and Dodge City, they all have major packing plants, and they all had major outbreaks of coronavirus. So packing plants have shut down. We have not been affected by that loss so much of the jobs. Some of our local gas companies have gotten that stimulus check and to pay for salaries. One of our elders has a oil field business. He's actually using that to pay his employees to help with some of our church repairs and painting and upkeep. So that's been such a blessing. We started raising money to have in place for when the anticipated food crisis hit, and we had a lot of people that were hungry, and that's there has not been a lot of that. There's been a few families that we've been able to help. We purchased cards from a grocery store. we could give to families so they could go buy groceries. Some of our people went down to a restaurant that started buying large bags of beans and rice and selling them at their price so families could come in and buy food cheaply. So Cheryl and I went down there and bought a bag, and I told them, I said, we're dividing all this up and passing it out to some of the low-income families we need. And I wish I hadn't said that. She said, well, if you're doing that with the beans, we're not going to charge you for it. I said, no, you've got to. We're doing this so we can help these other families. We want to, reimburse you for your expense. They said, not for helping hungry people. Take it. I mean, that's just been the spirit of the community. So we've had restaurants helping that way. Folks in the church have, and we have not been able to do that as much as we thought we would because really things are holding pretty well here.
Ah, good.
That's one thing that we've done. Jake?
Jake, how are you blessing the community? You shared some things about share the pinwheel thing. I heard you talk about that last week.
I'll share the pinwheel story. And we've done a lot of different things trying to do, just connecting. But one of the things that took off is it's been 4 weeks ago, a month ago on a Thursday, we started what we called the Shine Like Stars project out of Philippians 2. And we bought 100 pinwheels on Amazon, had them shipped here, built them. They came flat. That was a surprise to us. We had to build them, put them together, and then we split those in two. And we sent them out with a couple of our families from church and said, you guys get this going. Here's a poster. Here's some encouragement cards. And we put in people's yards that we felt like were shining like stars, doing a good job keeping our community together. School faculty, administrators, teachers, people that work for the city. We tried to say, don't just do it for our church family. Look out there into the community. And so we'd tape encouragement notes on their front door, and then they'd have that poster there that explained what had happened. And then the people that put it in somebody's front yard, all the pinwheels, the 50 of them, there'd be 50 out there in their front yard in the morning. Then your job as a church member was to call another church member and say, you go pick those up within 24 hours. And so the people that got it in their yard, they had no responsibility with it. And that just kept on. It's still going. I thought I was going to be happy if we went for 7 days. It's been going for 28 now. And I still see them all over town. I have no idea where they're at. We haven't tracked it. We've just kind of let it go. The pinwheel number is down to about 20 now in the yards. I think we've lost about 30 in each yard, but it's been great. It's been great. Social media, it's caught on. People are doing things like that. We just tried to do little things like that. Not only try to meet financial needs and try to help people as they went, but we also thought, how can we, do that? Like back to that first thing I said of how are we going to make sure that we're still being the light in Canadian when everything seems pretty dark? And so we tried to come up with little ideas. Our children's minister did an online talent show on Facebook. So families this was like week 2, families could, film their kids doing goofy little talents or fun little talents. We got some amazing stuff. We got like 60 people to do that. We had like 60 videos on a running feed, and it was just a lot of fun. A lot of community people got involved in that. We did one of my favorite nights was we did a prayer parade. And so we couldn't get people out of their cars, of course. But three weeks ago on Wednesday night, we just had, instead of having our online class like we've been doing and broadcasting that through Facebook, we had everybody come up and we split the town up and into different areas, praying over the businesses, praying over the oil and gas field, praying over the schools, praying over hospital, those things, and had families just drive around kind of in a parade. And then we finished it with everybody coming back, and we made a big circle around the hospital, which is across the street from our church building. And then we circled up around our church building and prayed all together. So that was a real neat night. That was fun.
That is awesome stuff. I want to encourage you, if you have a question for Jake or for Warren, just go ahead and put it on the chat, and we'll get to your question here in just a few moments. Do you have any other helpful ideas that you've heard about other churches doing? Anybody want to share on the chat, or Warren or Jake, have you heard of things other churches are doing to minister to the community and reach out? Because in rural communities, it is so vitally important the way people are connected, that they are connected in understanding how significant it is that this church is reaching out. This church is doing this. It's true anywhere, but it just seems like it has such an impact on the community. Jake, I think you're the largest congregation as far as Sunday morning attendance in Canadian, aren't you? Among any religious group?
Yeah, we are. We also, and I heard this from somebody else of make sure your church is still supporting a local paper. So that's one thing we jumped on too. So we put an ad in the paper every week, not for our church, just like an ad that's a scripture or an encouraging saying or something. I didn't want to do like things like, hey, join us. We've done a little bit of that, but we've tried to just support the town through those ways. And then we've also tried to support the town with just daily, not daily, but weekly, outside of Sunday, Wednesday, but having 10-minute little devos on Facebook or some way to connect with people.
Good.
But I've loved some of the stuff from hearing like deliveries, like Warren was talking about with elders taking flowers around. I mean, that's a home run right there. Because people, even if that's just for your people, everybody sees that. So.
Absolutely. Here's an idea that Wayne Atkins had just shared on chat. A couple of members in South Oklahoma, where he preaches, have approached our local funeral home to offer meals for families that have had loss and little support. That's pretty. That has a great impact. So if you've got another idea that your church has done, just share it. We'll bring it in there.
I would add that even though, like in Ulysses, we're coming to the end of our period, it's still, we're urged to use caution. We're urged to not push the boundaries, still maintain a sense of the social distancing, even in your assembly. I think when I say completely open, we're allowed to be completely open because in our church, because you have to be, I think, at 50% capacity, which means if you can seat 200, you're allowed to have 100 in there. But at the same time, maintaining social distance, which is why we're looking at having a separate program for children during the assembly. And I know there's arguments for having the children in there, but during this period of time, we're looking at having a separate upstairs where we have another whole open area where we can double more than what we would normally be able to have in our auditorium. Even though we're coming to the end of this, there's still going to be opportunities to use some of these creative new ideas for some time, because there is still this sense that we have to be careful. The pinwheel idea of Jake's was such a good one. We had a church here in town that they bought a whole bunch of crosses, and they bought a bunch of lumber. They actually made the crosses. They cut them, made the crosses, painted them. Or I don't think they didn't paint them. They put them as bare wood in people's yard, and then left the message: we encourage you to decorate this however you would like, paint it whatever color you would like, put things on it. And the members didn't know that was going to be done, and they woke up one morning and there's a cross in their yard, and it was just a pretty neat experience for their congregation. Some of these ideas that people are coming up with, there's going to be quite a period of time that this is still going to be a useful, viable ministry or function for us to perform in our church and community because of the ongoing lingering effects.
Wow, those are great things. I noticed Kristen Turner wrote a great phrase here, that children's ministry team and her congregation ordered signs in Tennessee to put in yards of members with children, youth, and senior adults. It says, "This family is loved and missed by Bellevue Church of Christ. The kids have loved it. It was also an opportunity for young adults to serve by driving all over Nashville to the homes of members to place the signs in yards." So I just think we need to keep sharing ideas that people can do to reach out and to bless others. And people say, one of the things, well, what about the gospel? What about the gospel? Well, you live the gospel as well as tell the gospel. And so there's an area that we didn't deal with yet, that, speaking of children's ministry, that is, what about coming back together in your plans? What about children's ministry? Because how do you keep kids from being kids? You don't. So how would you respond to that, Jake?
Warren, I like that Warren has some space for that. We don't have space for that. And so we're encouraging families with children to come to the outdoor pavilion, but we're not doing children's ministry or children's ministry classes. We think it's pretty safe, pretty comfortable in outdoors. It seems like all the studies seem to show that too, but we're going to wait. We're going to wait until it's pretty safe for kids to be together, because it's just so difficult for us to monitor that. And we just feel burdened to be responsible there.
Oh, that's great. Anything to add to that, Warren, or anybody else?
Yeah, we are not going to Bible classes for some time yet. We met last night, our elders met last night, and we have meeting our fellowship hall. We're well spread out. But we decided we're not even planning our our Bible class that precedes our worship. We're not planning that yet because we would be in classrooms that are more enclosed. So we're going to just go to the worship service for now. If one works fine, we'll go with the one. If we need to go to two, we'll go to two. And our children will be in a large room where they can be spread out. We have not looked, and that's a good idea, Jake. We have not really talked seriously about being outside yet, meeting outside. We haven't looked at that seriously yet. Don't know if we will, because we do have the room to be inside.
So what are some things that, I hear this from ministers. They're working harder than ever. One minister said last week, one of their elderly people, a sweet, kind lady, just kind of joked and said, "How's your vacation been that you've had all this time off?" And she laughed, he laughed, and he said, "Oh my goodness, I'm working twice as hard as I've ever worked and just pulling off the online stuff." And he said, the good thing about it is we have more people attending online than we do on a regular basis. So how do you respond to that? I mean, you probably have had similar things, people from all over joining you online. As we come out of this, how do we keep that kind of online presence going? Some of you have already had it. How would you respond to that?
We, when this first started, I was getting 1.5, about 1,500 views on Facebook, and I was pre-recording lessons. And I don't know how many of those actually watched it or how many just clicked on it and then clicked off. But the highest one we got was 2,500. For a church of 6,000, we're just pretty excited. Well, then as more and more churches started doing it, the numbers started dropping. And then we added a whole service. So we're running at like 300, 400 views now, which is still pretty good. But
Sure.
We've been asked by a number of people to continue the online presence after things open up.
Right.
And it shouldn't be a lot to continue with that. We may do it. But that's just been pretty nice that some people from out of town, but mostly people in town that go to other churches, say, please maintain that online presence. So that's something we're seriously considering.
Yeah, I think one of the terms I heard was phygital. It's a combination of physical and digital. That phygital.
Phygital.
I would like to create words. Phygital is that you've got to maintain a phygital existence going forward, both physical presence as well as digital presence.
Well, and
Jake,
so far as business,
Warren?
I'm sorry, to refer to your comment about a minister being busy, I have really not noticed. My schedule's been pretty much what it has been before with studying, writing, having to do sermons. I do a radio sermon every day. So a talk, 5-minute talk. I pre-record them. I'm still doing those and trying to say some things that are addressing our current situation and keeping hope up and things like that. Here again, this is a rural setting, a rural church. And we're way outside the scope of where our capital is back east and being a sense of being watched, observed. Where there have been warnings in the paper, don't violate or you could be arrested. But a lot of people here have just gone about business as usual. And it would not be unusual for me to have 4 or 5 visitors in a day in my office. And for May Day, which my wife always does something for May Day. This year she didn't. But we had a teenage girl in our church that got little kids, made up baskets and took them around to families in church. So they come to my office. One of these little boys just comes running up behind my desk and gives me a hug. And I'm thinking, well, nobody's explained social distancing to him. So if their family was comfortable with it, I was not going to push that kid away. We let him come up and gave him a hug. But there's just been a steady stream of people through the office and they want to see somebody and they know somebody's going to be at the building. So they come by. So we maintain a pretty normal schedule in that regard.
Yeah. Jake, you got any thoughts on this physical and digital, as they call it?
Yeah, I like that word there, Grady. That's good. But we were phygital before it started, and we'd seen the fruit of that. We've noticed a lot of people who will check us out online locally here, watch a few services that we've been streaming. We've been streaming for the last 2.5 years prior to the pandemic, and it's led to some baptisms. It's led to some great, wonderful gospel moments, and we're going to continue it. I think we've learned some of the areas we weren't doing it as well as we could, so we've improved, but I think we've also learned throughout it, that there's this pressure, and I don't know if you guys out there are getting these emails, but there's some church pressure from some gurus out there that are like, this is the digital revolution. And I get that maybe on some levels it is, but I think on another way, it's also it's going to be the community revolution. And this time apart is going to teach us so much how we need each other, and that the church is built to be together. The body of Christ, it exists in community for a reason, and I think we all know that. And so I think leaning into both those is a lesson for all of us, and we still have a lot to learn. I've got a lot to learn. I don't like looking at the camera while I'm preaching. I don't know if I'll ever get used to that. I'm sick of it. Really tired of it after 11 straight weeks, but we're going to continue to use it as best we can. It's out there and it can be a blessing to others.
Good. Let's shift to pastoral care of church leaders, ministers, and church as well. But I mean, for you personally, I mean, you can slice it any way you want. Somebody's got to lead. Somebody's got to coordinate. Somebody's got to be the front person on things. So during this time, I've heard from a lot of ministers who said, I'm tired. I'm tired of this. I'm just physically tired. I'm glad to do it, and it's given me great opportunities. But what are some things that sustain you personally as a minister or church leader in this time? Feel free to put it on chat as well, too. Anyone?
Tim put something up there too, and I mean, I think I'm right there with Tim. It's been exhausting, but yet rewarding. And a couple of weeks ago, I even, just vulnerability here. I got to a point where I had to go to some guys that I love and respect, and I know they love and respect me, that are part of my church family here. And I had to just say, I'm exhausted, guys. I need you. And the comments on Facebook are great, but I just am at a point where I was putting so much out there and putting so much into thinking about different ways to reach the community. I was kind of drinking from some dry wells, and it's been tough, but I'm grateful to be part of a church family that allows me to be very honest and open about my walk as well. And they don't go, well, the preacher's not supposed to talk like that. What they do is they surround me and pray for me just like they would anybody else. I'm so grateful for that.
So you sought out some friends and just were honest with them. And so,
yeah.
And I know you're a voracious reader, Jake. Every time I talk to you, have you read this book, Grady? Have you read this book? Have you read? You're a voracious reader. You're a learner. You're constantly doing it. Has there been anything that's been helpful that you've read or listened to, or podcasts or anything that's going to help sustain you? Or
I've been doing every other week meetings with a couple ministers that I've known for 20 plus years, and so that's been beautiful. I found myself reading I've read some great theological books during this time, but those haven't necessarily been food for my soul. Those have been great for my brain, but the food for my soul stuff has been just, I've gotten back in the Psalms, and I've always been in the Psalms, but just using that expression and finding words in the Psalms, praying the Psalms every morning and every night, and being part of kind of some spiritual direction with my wife, and those things that's what sustained me during this.
Good. Warren, what sustained you?
You're talking about just on a personal level, right?
Yeah, we're just talking about you personally, and you don't have to confess all you're saying right now, just some of it, okay? So,
just some of it, okay.
Yeah.
No, that's not sustaining, okay.
Oh, okay. Well, it can be.
That's draining, yeah. I don't read as voraciously as I used to. I think I got burned down on it some, but I still am reading something constantly. In fact, I've got several different books going. I actually started Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago.
Oh my goodness.
Like 3/4 through the first volume, and I haven't read it in the past week. But I'm thinking about, we're having a hard time now. We're under strain and stress. It's a difficult time. You read about spending 8 years in a prison camp like he did in communist Russia. And you think, man, I've got nothing. and just the spiritual strength that he drew from his experiences, and how that opened up his eyes to see what God really wants to do in the world. And I haven't gotten to all that discussion yet, but it's just truly amazing. He was one of the Russian soldiers that went through Europe and committed some atrocious acts. And he repented of that later, and he wrote a poem apologizing to the women of Germany for what he did. He wrote an epic poem. It's actually a book. It's just, just made me realize and reframe what I consider a hardship. He says in there that, we think we suffer for truth if we're socially ostracized. He says, no, we suffer for truth. We're thrown in prison, or we're shot. Now, that may not be directly connected to coronavirus, but it is connected to the idea of suffering and what God's people can endure and still continue to, hold out the torch and the truth. Something else I've done is I like to write. Somewhere I came across an interview with Paul McCartney on how he writes songs. So that got me to looking, well, how does George Harrison write songs? How does the Bridge Over Troubled Water guy, Paul something, how does he write songs? So I've done YouTube searches on how do songwriters write their songs, with a view toward how can that help me write my next essay on parenting? How can that help me write an essay on, how do you get creative thinking for the use of the gospel and what you're writing there? So I've spent quite a few hours doing that, and that has been very uplifting for me. That'll work over here when I write about relating to your son. So trying to build up that way. And as a communal thing, small community, my wife and I have started playing Scrabble together. So that's been fun.
That's great. That's great. That's good. Well, in the time we have left, I want to move to vision and mission. This idea, it seems that most of our church conversations are rightfully so about getting back together. This is good, but what about vision and mission? You've already alluded to it, Jake, a little bit about in your church using this time. It seems to me this is a great time to take inventory and think about what it means to be the church God has called us to. My friend John Mulligan, who's on this call, says that this time is a great excuse to change everything you need to change as a church. How would you respond to this vision and mission and moving forward rather than just looking backward to doing what we've always done?
Warren, you want to start?
We're in a strongly conservative Republican area, and we have, there's some strong views about how a medical crisis has been used by, many people would say, by political figures to foster perhaps their own careers or their own influence or power. So there is an element of, we want to go ahead and be the church without, not being concerned with what a politician in another part of the state or country might say. We want to go ahead and be the church that we feel like we're called to be. And yet our elders wisely realize we have to balance that with community perceptions. Does the community see that we care about them, that even if we don't agree with political decisions, we're going to do a certain thing because we think it's the spiritually mature thing to do and to show interest in them. So one of the things we even talked a little bit about, some of us anyway, is we've got to maintain the spirit of Christ while we try to function as the church, showing respect for the health of and concern of the community, even if we don't agree with how something is being handled politically. So that's a level of spiritual maturity we want to help people develop, both within our church, but also within the community. Even if we think something is ridiculous, there may be a significant portion of the community that doesn't think it's ridiculous. So we need to honor that, perspective they have and show that we care more about their health, and both spiritually and physically, than we do about exercising a right that we might have. So going forward, that's one of the things that we want to communicate to our community, to our church members, folks outside of our congregation, that we place our spiritual needs or concerns above maybe what our political rights are.
That's really good, really good. Jake, vision, mission going forward, what's going to change, if any?
Well, I hope this whole situation really helps us refine our visions. I think it's shown us that some of the things maybe we were sustaining when we could get together were maybe not the best things we could do as far as activities and events that we were putting on. our vision statement is this: it's together we follow Jesus for the sake of others. That's what we bounce everything off of. We believe that statement, our elders came up with that statement about 2.5, 3 years ago, after about a 2-year process of visioning. And I think it's allowed us to put some things on the table and go, are we hanging on to this just because we like it, or are we doing this because it's helping us follow Jesus for the sake of others? Is this drawing our church? Is this drawing our community towards Jesus Christ as the King and Lord? And it's allowed us to have some great conversations about what's essential and what's not, and what's the things that we need to be leaning into. And I hope that we'll continue to do that. One of the other things I hope it helps for our just normal churchgoer is I hope it helps us remove some of the masks, get past the kind of, I just do church on Sundays and I walk in and I walk out. And I hope I've been praying that people will see their deep need for Christ, and they'll see their deep need for each other. That's where we've been. I taught on this last night in our online class, but what is now the new normal of the last 11 weeks or whatever was always normal to the Acts 2 church. That's our Church of Christ passage, right? So last night, what was normal to them should be what is normal for us and for the future. And that is, they didn't have buildings, they didn't have programs, they didn't have events, but they had Jesus Christ at the center, and they were reaching out to their neighbor and showing a different way of life. They were discipling, they were serving, they were loving, they were giving to others, and they were keeping things in the center. And that should be the normal thing. That should be what we're defined by, not by what happens for an hour and a half or 75 minutes on a Sunday morning. And while that time's super important, it's not everything. And so I think we're kind of at a place where we can really kind of have some deeper conversations than we've ever had, and put those into action, not just have conversations, but put them in action, because now we've seen what that looks like.
Well, those are good responses. I think vision and mission, I call it vision forward. How do we move forward? Warren, you want to say something about?
Thank you to Grady for recommending this book to me back in October. He helped us kick off. We've had massive people moving from our congregation because of job transfers or retirement, and then leaving. And we were getting desperate. We were getting low, and we didn't see an end to the stream. So I said, Grady, we've been through a similar program. Help me structure some of this to do something here. And one of the books he recommended, and Grady was very helpful with that, and we're grateful to him. That helped lead to the 5 new families we have coming. But he recommended this book. And do I have a second just to mention something about it?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
It's about the Lewis. He bases church ministry on the Lewis and Clark expedition. They canoe through a lot of the rivers all the way to the Rocky Mountains. They get to the Rocky Mountains, think they're going to carry their canoes on the top and just coast down in the river into the ocean. One of them gets to the top of the mountain and he looks out and he goes, "Oh no." All they saw was this unending line of mountains. If you've ever been to the Rocky Mountains, you can climb up to one of the mountains and look out, and all you see is more mountains, nothing but. He comes back down and he pretty well concluded, everything we've done that got us here now has to be abandoned in the interest of starting something new to get us through the mountains. So everything that got us here and was successful was great, but now it's got to be left behind. So we've got to canoe the mountains is very different than canoeing the plains. And really where we are, this book I would recommend to anybody, because even if you didn't need it before, now we do. How do we, it just helps with ways. And what I like about the book, he doesn't say just take this book and do what I do, but apply the principles in your local setting. So you've got a sense of your own history, your own people, your own ideas, your own theological perspective, and you use that as the compost for the new growth that takes place. And it's very, very powerful. And I think it's a superb book for our time, Canoeing the Mountains.
That's great. Warren, did you have something besides Canoeing the Mountains you would highly recommend in light of the gospel?
Two of the things.
Not Warren. I meant Jake. I'm sorry.
Oh, you got me thinking about something else.
Yeah, sorry. I don't want
No, he can't keep his name straight.
That's right. I second that. It's Todd Bolsinger. Those of you, Jay, I think, was asking that in the chat. Todd Bolsinger, Canoeing the Mountains. Great book to get in the hands of your leadership, deacons, elders, staff, all that stuff. Another one that kind of summarizes, Grady, who wrote the book, A Failure of Nerve?
Edwin Friedman.
Yeah, Edwin Friedman's book, A Failure in Nerve, is really good for times that we're going through as well. But there's a shorter version of that that's been summarized called, oh, I just lost it. But
How to take
an open door, a door set open.
a door set open.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it does it from more of a Christian perspective. Friedman has a lot of things in there that, of course, apply to church, but A Door Set Open, who I can't remember the author of that, somebody Amazon that up or Google that up, takes a lot of those principles of what do you do when everybody's got full of anxiety, and what do you do in times like that and move forward. Steve Cuss, his podcast too on anxiety-free leadership has been really helpful during this time to me too.
Yeah.
Be the calm presence in the midst of chaos.
In any work by Peter Steinke, John Mulliken says Steinke wrote A Door Set Open. Yeah, but Steinke, it was a student of Friedman, and really lives in Austin, Texas. A very interesting guy to talk to. But any books by him, Teaching Fish to Walk is another one by Steinke. But they all deal with the same principles. But that's good stuff. That's really good stuff. So, what does anybody have a question? I haven't seen them come across that you'd like to ask either one of these guys. We got about 2 or 3 minutes left here, so you're welcome to ask a question. We can get it there. I'd like for you guys to be thinking about this though, while they're thinking about questions. Is, leaders must lead, and elder ministers together ought to be a team, leading with their gifts and having a good relationships and depending on one another. What are the conversations that leaders must have going forward? What are some of the conversations that leaders must have going forward? If you could think about that a second, because the conversations matter. We're only as healthy as the questions we're willing to ask, and leaders got to have the conversations. What conversations do they have to have going forward?
Shepherding his people, and we have to maintain that engagement with people, developing our influence with them, influence based on character and genuine concern and love for their well-being. And how do we do that in a changing environment, changing situation? The principles are still valid no matter what is going on in the country, whether we're quarantined or not. Engagement, influence, critical.
Good. Jake, can you think of some conversations that matter?
Well, very similar to what Warren said, but maybe just a little different would be, this time has given our leaders, and I think we've all experienced this, when we don't have that central hub of Sunday morning, it's given us this great question to go, well, how do we connect with people? And I think that impetus there needs to stay in all our lives of how do we continue to connect with people and shepherd people and show people Jesus Christ. And I think that's where we've got to continue to have those conversations. And then my conversation I want to keep pushing into is how has this situation created a deeper burden for the lost in our communities? And what are we going to change? What are we going to do in order to reach out to people that are now asking different questions, just like we've been asking different questions? People are looking for hope, and we have something to offer. In the darkness, we have light, and the light wins.
Yeah, people are looking for hope, without a doubt. And that's why I'm glad to be part of Hope Network, because that's what we're fundamentally about. And Oklahoma Christian Church Resources, we're going to do another one of these in the fall sometime, so you can be watching the OC website under Church Resources or Hope Network's Facebook page. And Bridget, do you have anything else to say about, are we posting in this someplace?
Yes, I will say we are going to post a replay on our Hope Network YouTube channel, and everyone who watched today will get an email with that link in it. Another thing I was going to say is I'm going to get Jake's infographic that he mentioned earlier from him and include it. And if any of the attendees want to send me a published plan their church has, I can include them all just so we can see what everyone's doing if we want to do that. My email is bridget@hopenetworkministries.org, and that may be on the email that you get earlier too. But we mentioned children's ministry, and I just wanted to say that Hope Network has just finished a series with some pediatricians and specialist in the arena, a series of 4 webinars that are also on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and listen to those, you could.
That's wonderful. Well, we love your feedback on this. We thank you for your presence today, and we're looking forward to doing another one of these in the fall with other people that have joined us today on this webinar that are part of our team. And we're going to look at a number of different things. Probably just be watching, or we'll send something out. Thank you for your time and appreciation. I want to close with a word of prayer and blessing for all those that particularly minister in rural context. Lord, we ask you to give us wisdom and courage as people of the gospel, shaped by your good news. Thank you, Father, for ministers and elders and leaders who lead in rural context. Thank you, Father, for the privilege of being a minister and serving others. Lift up drooping hands and weak knees and give them courage to continue to be your people. We're grateful for the opportunities you give us. Bless us, use us to your glory in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.